This is episode 26, a solo Q&A episode. Welcome to the Doc Fitness podcast, where it's all about developing your mindset, training and nutritional knowledge so you can lose body fat and build muscle effectively while still living a real life. I am your host, David O'Connor. Now let's get into the show. How are we keeping, guys, and welcome back to the Doc Fitness podcast. And today is our very first Q&A style episode where I have asked some questions over the last number of weeks on Instagram, and I'm taking the top 3 from those and going deep into them into a podcast episode. So funnily enough, I think the first 5 questions I got were all based around muscle gain, so hypertrophy, and just some intricate questions around that. I'm going to preface this by saying there is books upon books of this stuff. There's tons of research on this stuff. It's extremely hard to get across a lot in a podcast episode, as you already know, but I just like to bring that context back to people at times and not bullshit you into thinking that you're going to find out everything you need to know in this episode. It's not that case at all. That will never be the case with any episode, but hopefully we're expanding your knowledge and kind of get you to think in different ways over time. So let's get started with that. Where do you start when it comes to gaining muscle tissue? There's a lot of ins and outs with that in terms of where somebody is, in terms of how long are they training in general, how long are they resistance training, how long are you lifting weights, what kind of body fat levels you have, what kind of lifestyle you lead. All these kind of factors are going to play a role in that. I'm going to backtrack in context a little bit as we go throughout this episode, but let me start off by addressing the first question that which we got. So it was, David, in my opinion, or in your opinion, what's more important? Rep ranges, frequency, or volume for hypertrophy? So this basically means the rep ranges, the reps you do in a set. Frequency is how many times you train across the week. And then volume is the total workload that you do across the week as well. So the volume will be calculated by, if you calculated how many sets you did. So let's say you did 5 sets of 5 reps at 100 kilos in some lift or whatever it is, you multiply 5 by 100, and that gives you a total tonnage volume number. You do that for every single thing you do across the week. That will be your total volume across the week. So the short answer to these on what's most important is they're all important because they all kind of lead into one another. But for starters, I'm going to preface this whole episode by I need to cover some basics up first before I answer this. So let's just start off by what are the main drivers for, we'll say, triggering muscle growth, right? And if you look at the current research on it, right, there's a few kind of people that say, right, the number one most important factor for hypertrophy is mechanical tension. And this is basically the tension that you place on muscle tissue during exercise, right? The easiest way to think about this is lifting weights and progressively getting stronger in lifting weights over time for the different muscle groups, right? That's what I mean by mechanical tension. Now, I think it's quite clear that is the most important factor, or one of the most important factors when it comes to muscle gain. But there seems to be some secondary kind of factors to that as well, which aren't as important because it's kind of hard to research how important these are, because if you're trying to test another form of muscle gain, right, it's hard to kind of distinguish what's separate to placing tension on the muscles. So if you're doing a lift, if you're doing a squat, for example, and you do some heavy squats, or maybe you do a lighter weight for more reps, it's hard to determine what you're actually testing because there's still tension placed in the muscle regardless if you're doing a light weight or a heavier weight, if that makes sense. So those other 2 things are muscle damage and metabolic stress is the fancy word for it. Now, the easiest way to understand these is metabolic stress is kind of higher reps kind of stuff, so 15 to 20 rep range and beyond. It would be shorter rest periods, so you're given shorter rest in between sets, which means the set gets gassed, you're a lot quicker, you might be stronger from the start of the set till the 3rd or 4th set you do, for example. Higher reps, as I said, kind of pump style work, people on about getting big pumps, that kind of stuff. This is where the metabolic stress component comes in, right? And then the muscle damage component could be focusing on eccentric loading, which is basically if you're slowing down a movement, let's take a squat again, for example, and instead of just jumping up and down over your reps, you're going 3 to 4 seconds on the way down, getting a full range of motion, exploding up and contracting your quads and your glutes at the top nice and hard. That is making sure that you're really driving home, putting that kind of mind-muscle connection into the muscle tissue itself. Now, it's funny because people get carried away with either extreme. People might get carried away with saying, right, I need to do lots of eccentrics now because they're good for muscle gain, but they kind of lose sight of the fact that then, right, they can get more of lifting heavy in the same session as well. So that's why I'm kind of saying, like, and the same goes for like pump work. If you pick up a lightweight and you do fucking 20 reps bicep curls, your arms are going to be pumped because you're pushing blood into that muscle tissue. You're looking for an accumulation of metabolites, is the kind of fancy word there we're looking for. But again, all this basically means that mechanical tension is the most important thing when it comes to muscle gain, i.e. resistance training, and overloading that over time, making sure you're getting stronger over time, making sure you're doing more reps, more sets, more load over time, right? Kind of the secondary components then, and the ones that you can kind of pepper into like different phases, that kind of stuff, are the metabolic stress, so like pump style work, higher reps, shorter rest periods, and then you have muscle damage type stuff, so like eccentrics. Maybe you might go, if you take your normal squats again, for example, you might go heels, elevated squats, nice and slow, just a little bit slower, let's say 2 to 3 seconds of the way down, getting a full stretch to the bottom of the quads, driving up, contracting the quads hard. That would be kind of classified as muscle damage style work, okay? But again, it's about how do you kind of factor those into a program, right? And this is the way we program for all our clients as well. Like, this is based on feckin' science as such. So how do we kind of cover those aspects, right? And still kind of get stronger over time as well, because if you get kind of, some people get so focused on, like, high reps. And when I say high, I mean 12 to 20 reps. If you get so focused on 12 to 20 reps, you're going to get stronger in that rep range. But when it comes to like heavy squats and bench presses and deadlifts, usually people love to do them like in between the 4 to 8 rep range. You're not really conclusively building your strength in that range for that. So people can kind of go off the deep end. Someone might do, pure strength work where it's like below 5 reps in the gym, or they might go off the deep end where they're going 15 plus reps in the gym, and they don't understand that, right? You can set that up way better. So there are like the principles behind muscle gain. Hopefully that makes sense on some range, right? And when you kind of come away from that, then the current research of what we know shows that higher volume loads are better than lower volume loads for hypertrophy. Right, so stay with me now for a second, because this stuff can kind of go over your head if you don't see it in a paper format, and I am kind of getting across advanced concepts here, but again, I don't want to avoid these advanced concepts at the same time, so I'm trying to make them easy to understand, right? So we know that, i.e. we need to lift weights over time, we need to get stronger on those weights over time, and we know that, right, we can do some kind of higher rep work, shorter rest period work sometimes, we can do eccentric kind of work sometimes, and a lot of that will come back to like making sure we're getting full range of motion in the muscle tissue, we're feeling like mind muscle connection in the muscle tissue. All that stuff is super important, right? But volume itself, the amount of work you do for a specific muscle group across the week, I'm not going to say in one session, because we're not talking about one session here. It's kind of like calories. We don't talk about your food intake for one day and figure out why you're not losing fat just because you didn't eat at a calorie deficit for one day. We're figuring out your total volume across the week, okay? And it makes it easier as well to break up different muscle groups across the week, because then it will allow you to get more volume in, you won't be as sore, etc., etc. So if we know that volume is super important, like the latest research is showing that we need to be at least starting at like 10 sets per muscle group per week. Now, I've done some super detailed episodes on these already with Steve Hall and Mike Isertel back maybe 10 episodes ago, which they dive deep into that kind of stuff and like, where to start, what do I mean by a set, because does a set mean that you just go out and you do nothing on a barbell, you do 20 squats? Does that count as a set? No, it needs to be intense enough that it's actually making you fucking work according to your strength levels and whatnot. But so to save a lot of time, I think go back and listen to those episodes, goes into this stuff in way more detail than I'm going to get through here. But if we know that volume is one of the biggest drivers for that, let's backtrack to the question now. What's most important? Rep ranges, frequency, or volume? And as I said, they're all important, because if you look at building volume over time, right, this is the amount of sets and reps we do with the weight we lift. If I was to say to you that you have to train in like a 3 to 5 rep range on all the exercises you do, that would mean that you have to be working hard, so you have to be working at a heavy load, which means that when I say 3 to 5 reps, it basically means that you may not be able to get 6 to 7 to 8 reps if I told you to go to push, so you're using a heavy weight, right? If you're trying to do that across the week, it's very hard on your joints. You're going to need more rest and recovery in between your sets, because you need more recovery time the higher the load is, that kind of stuff. So is it the most ideal way to quote unquote build volume? And the short answer is no, because you can build volume a lot more effectively by kind of training in that 6 to 12 to 15 plus rep range. Like take for example, if I said to you, right, you should do 3x5 in a squat at X amount of weight. Let's just do some numbers on that. If I said you should do 3x5 at 100 kilos, in the squat. That's 1,500 kilos of volume by the end of the squat, right? If I said you to do 3 by 8 at let's go even a little bit less, at 70 kilos, just the 3 reps more per set, you're building, it's 1,680 kilos of volume. Basically, it's fecking more. It'll be a little bit easier in your joints. The recovery between a little bit shorter between your sets, so it allows you to get out of the gym a little bit quicker. So that's the easiest range to build volume across the week. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to neglect your strength work as well, because people know that, right, around the 3 to 6 rep range could be classified, quote unquote, as your strength work, if you like. I'm trying to keep this as easy as I can. So rep ranges, the majority of someone's work might be around the 6 to 12 rep range. Again, that's a very, very broad range, but this is where we do different phases over time as well. We might be training at a certain rep range for one phase, then we might increase that for the following phase. The following phase after that might be a super high rep range, but it does not mean that everything is super high. We're actually doing that now currently in our gym here in Galway with our members. We're going through what's called a metabolic phase. We're still keeping our basic strength work in at the start, but then we go through like a metabolic block in the middle of it where we're driving home, we're picking a muscle group to really focus in on, and we're literally hammering them with volume within that. Weights will be a little bit lighter, rest is shorter, there's more exercises per muscle group, so there's going to be a high amount of quote unquote metabolic stress again. So again, it's coming back to these principles. So rep ranges, while they're important, you don't have to be married to a certain range. In between the 6 to 12 over time, you're going to be doing pretty good. The majority of your strength work could be around the 6 to 8, 12 to 15 for like the rest of the work if you like. Very, very easy, simplistic way to understand it. But again, 6 to 12, 8 to 15, 15 to 20, they're all rep ranges that somebody can utilize. Frequency then, right, is the amount of workouts that you do across the week. If you're somebody with super limited time and you can only get in 2 sessions a week, the most effective way for you is to be getting in 2 full body sessions a week where you're kind of covering at least the basics of how much you need to do for a muscle group. Now, nobody knows this stuff. You're not meant to go to the gym and know how much sets and reps do I need to do this week to make sure that I'm able to grow my chest, to make sure that I'm able to grow my legs, grow my back. There's so many muscle groups as well, and you're trying to cram all that in 2 workouts. You'll be in the gym for 3 hours if you try to do all that. So there's going to be a trade-off. Like, you might just say to yourself, right, I have 2 days a week. We'd look at that more like a maintenance style phase for somebody. So they're hitting kind of like the basics of what they need to do in that week. The workouts are not crazy long. They can get it done. They can enjoy their workouts. They might see very, very, very small progression, but we tell them in their head, we're treating it like a maintenance style block until they can go into, let's say, 3 to 4 days a week when it comes to muscle gain stuff, right? Don't get me wrong, you can still drop fat and that kind of stuff and on those kind of protocols, but is it ideal for muscle gain? The short answer is kind of no, because you're kind of restricting yourself on how much work you can get done across the week. If somebody can push that 2 days a week up to 3 days to 4 days a week, now you have more room to play with more volume towards more muscle groups. Like if you're somebody who does 3 days a week and you add an extra day, you're adding anywhere from 4 to 6, maybe even 7 exercises in, from anywhere from 3 to 5 reps. You're adding in a lot of extra sets that have come literally out of nowhere. So if you did 2 lower body sessions a week and now you're adding in an extra one on a third day and you're doing, another set of squats, another set of hamstring work, for example, now you're adding in 3 to 5 sets extra per week per muscle group in that. Is that going to be good for muscle gain? Of course, if you're doing enough across the week. But again, guys, we've gone into detail in this in the previous episode with Steve Hall and Mike Israel, so go back to those if you haven't listened to those. But hopefully you get what I mean. Frequency is basically how you break it up across the week. If somebody wants to do a full lower body session on Monday, you can do that, but is it optimal? Not really, because again, the science shows that within something like 48 to 72 hours, your body is basically fully recovered and ready to go again. So you can hit a muscle group a lot sooner than a 7-day period before your second session, for example. So if you're able to do like 10 sets of quad work on a Monday, but you're also able to do another 3 or 4 sets on a Thursday rather than waiting again for the Monday to just do another 10 or 12, you're able to bang in, 13 sets in week 1, and you can add in a couple of more sets week 2, so you're building that volume over time, right? So, the long-winded answer to around all that is to give you more perspective on this stuff. A lot of you are probably confused now by all that. The easiest way to think of this again is, the most important thing is resistance training over time and getting stronger in that. If you're in 3 days a week, just focus on training what you're currently doing, but looking to be getting stronger, maybe to add in a couple of reps here and there, adding a couple of sets per muscle group across the week can work wonders. But again, I've explained on this in those previous episodes where we talk about Delord weeks as well, because you can't just keep doing more and more and more and not expect to be hitting a wall. there needs to be a time when you pull back as well. But to answer the question again on what's most important between rep ranges, frequency and volume, they're all important. But the frequency and the volume question comes back to, right, how much time do I have across the week? What are the muscle groups that I want to focus on a little bit more? And you allocate more sets and reps towards those muscle groups you want to work on, but you don't just neglect. Like if somebody wants to work more on their chest, it doesn't mean that they don't train their legs, they don't train hamstrings, etc., etc. So hopefully there's some insight into that for you. The second one, let me take a sip of my coffee. I'll try to make this one a bit more easy to understand, because I understand that stuff is kind of deep. But again, it's what you need to fucking know if you're actually serious about this stuff. And we like to tell all our clients this stuff anyway, so they have a basic level understanding of it. And they understand why we're doing certain things. They understand on a deload week, which is basically a week where we do half of the volume we normally do, maybe a little bit over half the volume that we normally do. Because you can start to feel like refreshed and recovered near the end of those weeks, we have to hold our clients back not to go hammering themselves those weeks, because they feel so good, their fatigue has dropped, they're recovered, they're feeling stronger, they can actually push more weight. We have to hold them back because the following week we're starting a new training block, and that just means that they're going to be progressing from where they left off kind of in the other block as well. And then you have another 4 to 5 weeks of progressing. We'll take a deload week again, then we're progressing again. So it's kind of like 3 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing over time. Second question anyway. What is the difference, Dave, in nutrition and exercises for someone who is bulking or cutting? Now, I was laughing at this question kind of this morning with the coaches, Robbie and Ushin, because it's an absolute mammoth of a question. There is literally books written on this stuff. So I'm going to take a certain spin with it and we'll just go with that. But it is, just realize that this is a gigantic question that I have no notion of getting across in 10 minutes or less. But first of all, let's say, so what is the difference in nutrition, first of all, between someone who's bulking or cutting? Firstly, I don't like using the terms bulking or cutting, because bulking simply has like an old school bro science kind of mentality attached to it, where like it's kind of like, oh yeah, I'm bulking, but it's usually done by guys that haven't an absolute fucking clue what they're doing. They might do a bit of work in the gym, they're just copying their friends who might be a little bit bigger than them, training a little bit longer, or they might be in a gym where somebody's up to their eyeballs in steroids and they're just starting to copy them, or they're copying a YouTube program, or they're copying something that's not, let's say, ideal for them, and they just start eating all around them. Bulking kind of has that connotation attached to where people are basically just getting fat over time, and then yes, they would have gained a little bit of muscle, but the majority of people I see doing it are not training effectively and they're eating way too much. So like what we like to say is, right, we're in a gaining phase, and again this gaining phase is super planned out, it's super smart, it's based off what are the proper rates of weight gain a month, kind of weight gain to muscle gain ratio, because when you gain muscle tissue, fat gain really is inevitable at the end of the day. You're going to have to know that, right, I'm not going to magically put on muscle without putting on an ounce of fat. It's fairy tale stuff. You have to gain fat tissue along with muscle tissue as you're gaining, because you're in a caloric surplus, which is going to drive weight gain over time. So the difference in nutrition, the differences between bulking and cutting, we like to say, is that you're in a fat loss phase for cutting, or it could be a mini cut phase if it's more of an aggressive kind of cut, so like a shorter term, more aggressive kind of style dieting phase, if you like. And the bulking phase, we just call them like lean gaining phase or a gaining phase. Just again, it's a better mentality attached to it, and you're looking at it from a more kind of scientific perspective, and you're going to do this shit right. You're not following people on Instagram with their tops off, and just because they know how to train hard, they look in incredible shape. Like, don't get me wrong, yes, they might be in incredible shape, but does that mean that they're in incredible shape by the smart way they train? It may not be, and you might be able to get there through a much easier route when your training is a lot smarter and enjoyable and progressive in nature over time. But the simplistic differences in nutrition is that for weight gain, you're in a caloric surplus. You're eating more energy than you're expanding. For cutting, for losing body fat, you're in a caloric deficit to drop that body fat, but you're ensuring your protein intake is high enough so you're holding onto the muscle tissue while you're dropping fat. Now look, there's been episodes done on that to death already. Even go back to the second episode ever where Danny Lennon goes through setting up a fat loss diet. They all cover that. I'm not going to harp on about them here, and I've been talking about a lot of those on Instagram lately too, as of recording this in February 2019, if you are listening to it around that time. But what are the differences then in training? I'm not going to say, like, again, we're not looking at exercises in isolation. We're looking at training as a bigger picture, right? Training is not going to change. Like, you're not going to start doing fucking trampoline exercises for fat loss just because it might burn. You've heard somewhere it burns more calories. You're not going to start doing high intensity interval training because you heard it's better and it's you get a workout in a shorter time frame and it burns more calories. Again, these are all relative things. If somebody is doing, let's just say somebody's resistance training 3 to 5 times a week, they're doing the exercises right, number one, they're doing the right amount of work in terms of how hard they push across the week according to what week it is. Though these are all factors. Like, you don't just go into the gym and hammer yourself every week. They are doing the amount of work needed to grow muscle tissue in the muscle groups they want to train. So let's just pretend that all those factors are on point, right? The difference in training is going to be how much volume, so how much workload, how many sets and reps can you do across the week, basically, and still recover from that going forward. That's why, if you go back to those episodes I keep talking about, the Mike Gibbs episode where he talks about kind of how much sets to do across a week for muscle gain, you start at like a lower set number and you build it up as the weeks go on. You've probably heard me talk about this a lot before. Like, week 1 could be like a nice handy training week. You know, you're doing roughly 3 sets per every muscle group you're training. Week 2, some muscle groups will be brought up to like 4 sets a week, some will stay at 3. Week 3, it could be like most exercises you do are brought up to 4 sets. What's that, week 3? Week 4 then, some exercises could be going to 5 sets, some even could be going to 6, it all depends, and some could be staying at 4, you might even have some at 3. It all depends on if you're trying to really drive home muscle tissue growth in that muscle as well. These are all factors that are in play, like. So let's just say that if someone was bulking, quote unquote, oh jeez, I just said that word I didn't want to say, so let's just say somebody was gaining weight, right, and they're able to handle X amount of workload across the week, and they built it up for 4 weeks. They took a back off week in week 5 where they're only doing 2 to 3 sets per muscle group, right? Let's say they can handle X amount of sets per muscle group across the week. I know I'm getting a bit more advanced now here, but let's just say that number is 20 sets, yeah, on week 4, and then they're taking a deload. When they're in a caloric deficit, when they're dropping body fat, they might only be able to handle 16 to 18 sets per muscle group, because you're not giving your body the amount of energy that it needs to fucking thrive. You're going against what it wants. You're giving it less energy to burn off body fat. You might not be able to recover from the harder training you would have been doing if somebody was gaining weight. So hopefully that makes sense. So basically, the short answer to that is, how much training volume can you handle? Like, things like going out for cardio, going for high intensity interval training, they only become like important if somebody, like, let's just say if you have somebody who trained 3 times a week in the gym, and they're sitting on their arse all day long at work at an office job outside that. Yes, then of course we would get our first protocol with that person would be try to get them more active in general. We might look at planned walks throughout the week, that kind of stuff. And if they want, they could probably afford to put in like a high intensity interval type training session, because the fact is, when people do those high interval HIIT sessions, we'll call them, they're usually like 15, 20 minutes to 30 minutes long. Usually like 15-20 minutes when done right, it's all you need. But when they are done right, when they are done properly, which no one really does because they're just bastardized videos on Instagram of people just jumping up and down over boxes and stuff, and they're calling it HIIT training. When you do it right, it has a big recovery depth in the body. Like, you're trying to do 3 sessions a week, you're trying to be active outside that, you're trying to throw in a high intensity interval training session. You could be, impeding your recovery for your following weight training session, and the weight training session is like 80% of the work, where that is your priority to get done across the week. You don't want the other training taken away from that. So these are all more factors you can think of as well. But again, we would only look into doing something like that, like high intensity interval training for someone if they were stuck for time, if they were sitting down a lot at work throughout the week, they weren't active in general. Whereas we have some clients that only do 3 sessions a week with us, and because they're so active during the week, we actually have to be careful that they don't want to do too much, for example. So there's all different factors. It doesn't, just because high intensity interval training, the science behind it is shown to be effective for fat loss because it's burning more calories, all this kind of fancy stuff. When you actually look into it, the extra calorie burn isn't that much. It's just that it's an effective thing to get into a shorter time frame with a workout. Some people love them, some people don't, but it doesn't mean that you have to do it. If it's conclusive to your goals and if it's going to help you, then maybe it might be, but it doesn't mean that you just mindlessly start doing it, okay? So the differences in exercises, which is training, they're not going to change. It just matters. The only thing that's going to change is how much work you do across the week. Again, this is assuming that somebody is doing some heavy squats, they're doing some like heavy single leg work, they're doing a bit of machine work for muscle building because it makes life a lot easier, rather than just doing free weights all the time. They're doing some like heavy deadlifts, heavy RDLs, heavy rows, that kind of stuff, yeah? This is what I'm talking about here. And again, obviously then as well, the differences in nutrition, there's going to be differences in rates of weight gain when you're in a gaining phase. It's much slower than a fat loss phase because you lose fat tissue at a much faster rate than you would gain weight, muscle tissue. It's just a slower process, and that's just the shittiness aspect of it. And hopefully that answers that. There's not that much really there. Someone's in a surplus when they're gaining weight, you're eating more food, but again, it's too deep to go get into the ins and outs of how much more do you eat because it's all individualized to the person. But basically, in a shorter sense, in an easier sense, you're eating more food than you're burning off. So you're taking more food in that you're burning off, which is going to help you gain weight. If you're doing enough training volume across the week, hopefully that weight that you do gain will be shifted more towards muscle tissue and a little bit towards fat gain. Yes, that means that you will come to a phase where, right, you have to pull back now on that because you can't just keep gaining weight forever and hope that you're just going to be all lean muscle tissue. And that's why you might see me talking about doing mini cuts and that kind of stuff throughout the year, is when I come out of a gaining phase, like we're doing with Coach Ushi now. We're on about bringing him into a mini cut soon. He's been in a gaining phase now for the last few months. He's been... he's maybe 4 months down a gaining phase, and he's absolutely loving his training at the moment. He is a bit concerned with the body fat creeping up a little bit higher than he wanted because he went a little bit harder on Christmas than he would have liked. But at the same time, I'm just telling him to stay going right now because he's enjoying his training so much, because he's training harder. And when he comes around now, and I think we're reassessing in like 3 weeks time, we're going to look at getting him into like a mini cut phase then, which is basically an aggressive fat loss phase where you get in, you lose as much fat as you can in like a 4 to 6 week block, and you get back out of it into a gaining phase again. But bearing in mind, like Oshin has been years training, Oshin knows how to get lean, he's been super lean before, and this is why we have him in such a prolonged gaining phase, because he's been so kind of gung-ho on losing weight and looking good lean. Now we want to pack on a bit more size onto him, okay? So yeah, that's that. The last question then was around building muscle and losing fat. It's like the holy grail. Everyone fucking wants this. Mostly lads that I see. Ladies, when they hear the word muscle gain, they get a bit concerned. But like everything I'm talking about here is the exact same for a lady compared to a man. It's not any different. If you look at my partner Kate, we're getting married in, what are we getting married in? 2 months time. She is training hard and coming up to the wedding, and if I just tell someone the amount of kind of work and volume she's doing, they think that, oh my god, she's a bodybuilder or something like that, or someone think, oh, she's going to get big and bulky. It's never the case. Like, I think a lot of ladies know that by now, especially ladies that follow Doc Fitness. They know, right, lifting weights is going to make you look damn fucking good naked and get you stronger and get you more confident over time. But ladies are still kind of shying away from it, thinking that the stuff that I talk about for men is a little bit different for ladies, and the majority of it isn't. Like, if anything, ladies can usually handle a little bit more volume than men in the gym. So if you put a lady beside one of our lads here that's experienced in the gym, the lady will usually leave him for dust in the session, which means that she'll get it done quicker compared to the man, because the recovery times are a little bit shorter, which is an interesting thing to observe. But building muscle and losing fat, right? Here's there's a lot of ins and outs of this, but is it possible is the first question. There seems to be research out there that shows that it is, right? But this is usually research that is done on people that are classified as obese, so they're carrying a lot of weight, and they haven't resistant trained before. So when you take people like that and you put them under a proper resistance training routine, and they're doing it right, which is another massive factor in itself, they are losing body fat, but they're gaining a small bit of muscle tissue at the same time. And there is other research out there as well to show that this has happened in experienced people as well. But to be honest, while we educate people on that, we try to get them out of thinking, I want to build muscle and lose fat at the same time. And we kind of get them to thinking, right, it depends where you're at. But if you want to gain muscle tissue, I want you to look at it as a lean gaining phase. You're gaining muscle. And if you want to lose fat, we want you to look at it as, I'm losing fat tissue and maintaining the muscle I have, rather than kind of thinking in your head, oh, I want to gain lots of muscle now and I'm losing body fat. It just kind of, it makes you look at them as one singular thing, even though they're kind of not. It's a lot easier for someone to kind of judge and track that over time, we find, right? And again, like, science might come out now and this stuff in the next couple of years to show that, right, it's possible up to a certain point, or X, Y, or Z, or blah, blah. But from what we know at the moment, quote unquote, it is possible. Is it the most what's the word I'm looking for? Is it the most productive way to go about that? No. Like, if somebody is carrying a lot of body fat, right? If a male could not see the outline of his abs right now, is it smart for him to, quote unquote, go into a building muscle phase where he's eating more and he's trying to gain muscle? I would say no, simply because first of all, it depends on how long he's training. If he's a lot of muscle built already, he'd be more better off suited to going into a fat loss phase, get into a range of body fat levels where he's lean in terms of, like, you can see his abs, he's out at least like a good definition of his abs, so that when he starts putting on muscle tissue, he can stay in the gaining phase for longer, but the majority of the weight gained will go towards muscle gain versus fat gain, depending on how he's going about that. Like, if he starts eating all around him and doesn't track it and all this kind of stuff, yes, he's going to gain a lot of weight, but somebody is in a better position to gain muscle tissue the leaner they are. Now, I'm not going to go down a rabbit hole with that, because that is another episode of a whole podcast in itself, but basically understand it like this. If somebody's carrying more body fat and they want to go gain the muscle tissue on top of that, they're going to lay down more fat cells over time, and they're going to increase the ones that are already there as well. So in the long run, you're making it harder to lose muscle tissue in the first place. I have one client online now where he has come to me wanting to get bigger, right? But he's kind of in a phase in between. Like, he's done a bit of training in the past. He's a good bit of muscle built. He's a strong dude, right? And we're in a fat loss phase currently, right? But yes, the last few weeks his friend in the gym has met him, and he's like, why don't you gain weight, man? Why don't you be like me? I'm bulking at the moment. Like, get fucking big. And he told me this, like, he was questioning, like, should I not be in a gain phase? And I had to remind him, just because his friend said this to him, because it makes you double think things at the end of the day. I had to remind him, like, that, right, your friend right now thinks that he knows what's right. I asked him the question, like, is your friend super lean? Can you see his abs? Short answer was no. He's like roads coming out the side of him. Right, that's the first red flag. Does he know what he's talking about if he's telling someone to gain weight when he's in that shape himself? And then I was asking kind of what kind of stuff he was doing in the gym. Then when he started telling me, I just kind of was like, okay, you need to stop listening to that friend. But on a serious note, then I was educating him again why we're in a fat loss phase right now, and when we will be in the gaining phase. And he's starting to realise that now, because now he's getting leaner. He's over 10 pounds down in 4 weeks, which is crazy. And we're actually having to slow him down a little bit. And in whatever period of time we get to, he will be in the gaining phase, and he'll be probably in the gaining phase then for 6+ months when we get there. And he'll understand, right, I've done this kind of stuff right now. Whereas, because he was years, doing it by listening to opinions from friends, doing it what he thought was right, and he was getting fucking nowhere. And now we're figuring out as well that that's one thing. We're figuring out now as well that his training, even though he was kind of doing what appeared to be good and right, and he strong on like squats and bench and deadlifts and pull-ups and that kind of stuff, I realised that he was kind of cutting a lot of corners with his training as well, and a lot of kind of, let's say, not the best reps in the world, that kind of stuff. So now we're really focusing on that, and again going back to progressive overload over time, getting full range of motion through the muscle and whatever exercise you're doing, all that kind of stuff, which all comes back to principles for gaining muscle over time. So while building muscle and losing fat, yes, I'm going to say it is slightly possible. Is it the most productive way to go about things? I'm going to say no, because you can get more out of planned phases. I'm not going to get into how long those phases should be or the rates of this, that, and the other, because I'll be here all day. But just know that that's the kind of way that we would approach it, and hopefully there's some takeaways in there for you. It's just kind of like an eye-opener episode to really drive home on what causes somebody to gain muscle tissue. Like, all this stuff is well and good, and you listen to it now, but if you're in the gym and you think you're doing things right, it's funny, we have people that think they're doing things 100%. When we get them in front of us coaching them, it's a complete other story, and they're shocked. Like, they're shocked over time. They're like, fuck, I thought I was doing this right, or I thought I did the squat right. I can't even walk today, Dave, because I did the squat. Like, we get someone in, we do a lighter weight with the squats, but yet the next day they can't even walk, and they did the same amount of work they did the last week. But what have we done differently? We've tweaked their technique. We've got them to create more tension in the muscle tissue itself. It doesn't mean that that's going to be conclusive going forward, or we're doing super slow eccentric work to make him slower purposely. It just means that we're getting that person more conclusive now to training for what they want. Do you know if that makes sense? Because you could not be doing a full range of motion in most of your exercises. You could be using momentum in the exercise rather than actually targeting in on that muscle tissue, getting a good mind-muscle connection, putting yourself in the best leverage position to get the most out of that muscle, like getting a stretch in the muscle in the bottom position and coming up and being able to contract that muscle in the top position. You could be skimping on range of motion, as I've already said, like not going deep enough on certain things, which is a lot of people do and they think that they are. And again, bouncing reps is another one. But again, I'm backtracking a bit to the range of motion stuff. I thought that years ago I was doing stuff. Sorry, I talk really fast when I get excited about this stuff. But I thought years ago that I was training through quote unquote a full range of motion, right? Now, a full range of motion is classified as getting a range of getting to a certain depth, right? Let's say in a squat, that allows me to get a safe range of motion. If I had mobility issues right now and I tried to go down in a squat and my back started round and over as soon as my hips went parallel, is that safe for me? No is the short answer. Yes, there are things we can do to work around it, but a safe, full range of motion is kind of what we're after here. And then we try to get that client to a full range over time if their body will allow it. Yeah, because some people obviously have injuries and different hip structures, that kind of stuff. But well, I thought I was getting like full range of my squats. When I actually went to like my first personal trainer well back in the day, I think I was only doing fucking like half rep squats, if even. Do you know, when I look back, it's funny to think about, like, because my whole ego was literally smashed within one session because I thought I was training for like a year solid, and I was literally doing Mickey Mouse stuff, using weights that were way too heavy and wondering why I wasn't getting anywhere. And it's funny what your ego can do, because even though I could see that for myself, I still wouldn't, you know, I think I was grand until a professional pointed that out to me and showed me how to do it properly. So just because you're getting stronger and exercise and stuff over time, it doesn't mean that you could be getting the most out of your muscle game, because you really need to know how to target that proper muscle tissue and contract them hard at the top and get a controlled stretch at the bottom. How do you keep tension on the muscle as you're going down a lift versus coming up and contracting? All those questions come into play. But guys, hopefully there's a lot of takeaways here for you, that you'll understand kind of the overall principles behind muscle gain. And again, this is based on like some of the top researchers in the field, like Brad Schoenfeld, James Krieger, those kind of guys that are at the forefront of doing the research in this, and of course my own opinion from what we've seen over time as well. They're just doing shit that works. Like, as I'm talking about this, I'm after coming back off my latest gaining phase. Did my body measurements last week, in the exact same conditions again. So like, you can do body measurements, and if you do them different times a day, you know, after different meals, all that kind of stuff, after a workout, the measurements can be skewed. But I'm just letting you know I did them in the most accurate way possible. Same time of day, same room temperature, all that kind of fancy stuff. And I think my chest and my back was up over 2 centimeters, which is fucking huge for me. My quads were up over 2.5 centimeters, which was absolutely chuffed with, because that was my main goal the last 6 months. But again, I'm bringing up that point because I don't just say this stuff. I actively practice it myself. I actively practice with the coaches, and we do it every single day in, day out with our clients and with our online clients as well. So there's a lot of takeaways there, guys, for you to get out of this. Hopefully it was helpful. Any more questions, let me know. But hopefully the next episode won't be as deep. We can get more like specific practical takeaways. But there's definitely a lot of practical takeaways in this for you. Even if you look at your training now from a more hypertrophic standpoint and you're like, right, am I getting full range of motion on my exercises? Am I able to control that squat the whole way down, feel the tension through my legs, and push hard to the floor, come back up the top and squeeze my actual quads and my glutes? Am I able to do that? Am I able to get a stretch in my hamstrings when I'm doing Romanian deadlifts? Am I able to get a feel in my back when I'm doing a row? Am I able to feel my back when I do a chin-up? Which is another one that people make shit up every time because they're not strong enough for chin-ups, and they're too ego-driven to make them scalable to their level. So all those questions come in. Am I getting to squeeze my bicep with a bicep curl and controlling the eccentrics, so I'm not just letting it drop? Am I getting a full stretch at the bottom of that bicep curl? I'm not cutting the rep, half cutting the rep because I know the weight's too heavy, but I'm going to keep going on it because my ego can't bear going down to a lighter weight. Hopefully you know what I'm talking about. I'm going to leave it at that. thanks a million for tuning in, guys. If you have any questions in the future, they will always be asked over my Instagram channel, and you'll find this episode over on Doc Fitness Online. Episode, I can't even remember. Let me check it right now. Episode 26. My last guest episode was with Carter Good on episode 25. And if you haven't listened to that, it's a great one, guys, to kind of set you off for this year as well. But yeah, Doc Fitness Online /episode 26. You will find the links to the other podcast episodes there. And if I have any training articles, which I think now that I'm after realising I have about 2 or 3 in my head that I could share with you, that I wrote a couple of years back, I will pop those up in the show notes page as well. Thanks for tuning in, and we shall chat to you soon. Bye bye.